Today we're breaking down this Big Ten matchup between Penn State and Purdue. First, I want to talk about the coaching staffs and rosters for both of these teams, and then we'll dive into the matchups on each side of the ball. So with that said, we are going to start with Penn State. And when I think about this offense, the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that flat out this offensive line needs to be much better than it was last season, as this is an offense that ranked outside of the top 100 when it came to rushing yards per game. And I happen to think that running back Kayvon Lee can be a very effective runner and probably can eclipse that 1,000-yard season on the ground if this offensive line opens up some holes for him in the running game, as he is a very effective runner between the tackles and certainly finishes through contact. Then you take a look at quarterback Sean Clifford, and this is a guy that got off to a pretty good start last season before the injury. Offensive coordinator Mike Yurcich comes back, so there is some continuity there. And Clifford, for his career, is around a 60 to 61% completion guy. So I think he is going to need to be more accurate and precise this season, but I think he will be as he is back healthy. And as I said, he's got that continuity with second-year coach Mike Yurcich, who was very productive in his stint before Penn State. And then we take a look at this receiver room, and yes, they lose Jahan Dotson, but I think between the likes of, guys like Parker Washington, Keandre Lambert, and Mitchell Tinsley, they can be pretty good, as Parker Washington is a physical receiver that certainly gets yards after the catch. And then if Mitchell Tinsley steps up as that second or third option to me on the perimeter and has a productive season, I think this can be a good to great receiving core. We know that Brenton Strange is a mainstay at tight end, so this offense has to improve and get better than it was last season, and I really think it will as Sean Clifford comes back as that seasoned vet. Obviously, I think his completion percentage is going to go up. Mike Yurcich comes back. They've got that solid running back and tight end duo, and then the receivers just need to step into larger roles. Then we move on to the defensive side of the ball for Penn State, and I think they have some depth and talent along the defensive line, even though they lost a guy like Arnold Ebiketie. Excuse me if I mispronounced his last name, as he had 9.5 sacks last season. Maybe a guy like Nick Tarburton steps up and generates some pressure on the quarterback this season. Then I think linebacker Curtis Jacobs can be a standout player in the Big Ten this year, as he had 3 sacks and the most forced fumbles on his team last season for Penn State. So they do lose some guys in the secondary, but they do get back Jair Brown, who was the third leading tackler for this team last season. So again, I'll say this about Penn State. They've recruited at a pretty high level, so while there might be some young guys out there on defense or some guys without much experience, they're not devoid of talent. Then we move over to Purdue, and they do return significantly more production than Penn State, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think Jeff Brom has done a great job of this program as he enters into his 6th season. And then we all know about Aiden O'Connell at quarterback. This is a guy that completed over 70% of his passes last year, and he doesn't really blow you away with his physical tools or his overall skill set, but I see a guy that is very efficient, has great pocket awareness, and really moves well within the pocket. You look at guys like Brock Thompson and TJ Sheffield coming back at receiver. Yes, they lose David Bell, but I think similar to Penn State, those are guys that are capable of stepping up and playing larger roles for Purdue this season. 3 of the 5 offensive linemen return after a nice showing last year when they allowed actually less than 30 sacks last season. So that's a pretty good number. Now, defensively, they were a solid unit last year, and they do return a decent amount of production on this side of the ball. As I said, even though they lost a guy like George Karlaftis, senior Jack Sullivan is going to take over for him, and he did pretty well in the bowl game last year, as he had four tackles and a sack in that game. I think Jalen Graham at linebacker could be a standout player. And then there are mixed opinions about this secondary as a whole, but I do think there's more of a sure thing at cornerback than there is safety, but they should be okay at safety as well. And ultimately, to me, when you look at the matchups in this game, I think we know what Aiden O'Connell is going to do, just because I think Purdue has such a well-schemed offense and he is such an efficient player. I think quarterback Sean Clifford for Penn State is going to have to match that efficiency to some degree. He's going to have to take a step up and match that efficiency, as I said. Penn State has some young talent on the defensive side of the ball. I'm looking for one of these guys in the front seven to kind of try to wreck the game and disrupt the timing of this offense and get into the backfield quickly. As I said, Purdue has such an efficient passing game. Do they have guys that are capable of doing so? Yes, as I said, Penn State is very talented. So ultimately, if Sean Clifford can match Aiden O'Connell's efficiency and accuracy, Penn State is going to have a chance to sneak in here and get a win. I do realize that they are favored by 3.5, but let's face it, Purdue won 9 games last year, and Penn State only won 7 and or 8 if you consider the bowl game, which I'm not sure that they won or lost. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all for watching, and be on the lookout for more episodes as we get closer to week 1 of the college football season.